Welcome to the Property Management Mastermind Show with your host, Brad Larson. Brad owns one of the fastest growing property management companies in San Antonio, Texas. This podcast is for property managers by property managers. You'll hear from industry-leading professionals on best practices, new ideas, success stories, and lessons learned. This is your opportunity to learn about the latest industry buzz surrounding property management, as well as tips and strategies to improve your business. Now here's your host, Brad Larson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the Property Management Mastermind podcast. Be sure to check out our website at propertymanagementmastermind.com, where you will find all of our episodes, products, and services to review, to include our newly launched Biz Dev Mastermind offering, which is consulting services for companies looking to hire and grow using a business development manager. You can visit that site at bizdevmastermind.com. In addition, I wanted to announce the Property Management Mastermind Annual Conference going on in Las Vegas, March 2, 3, 4 at the Mirage Hotel in 2020. Visit the website at PMMCON.com. If you sign up for the conference and both add-on seminars, you'll get a 10% discount. I look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas. Lastly, be sure to find us on Facebook to join the conversation of over 6,000 members in the Property Management Mastermind Facebook group.
Tenants not changing their air filters? Costly HVAC repairs and unhappy owners got you down? Filter Easy is a subscription air filter delivery service that solves this problem by shipping filters directly to the tenant's front door when it's time to change. Tenants actually change them, which reduces HVAC-related maintenance calls by an average of 30%. Filter Easy's no-cost-you solution functions as a profit center to give you back time and money. Call 1-800-308-1186 today to learn more.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the Property Management Mastermind Show. I'm your host, Brad Larson, and today's guest, I'm very excited to have Mr. Flynn Cochran here from Echelon Front. And to give you a real quick interview or introduction to the interview, Flynn is coming to us from the book Extreme Ownership. And I'm going to let him kind of talk more about that, but he's going to be at the Mastermind Conference speaking Marquee on stage Wednesday. And then he's also going to be adding on and do a 3-hour seminar on Wednesday. That's March 2, 3, 4, Property Management Mastermind Conference, Las Vegas, the Mirage. Go to PMMCON.com to learn more and get signed up. So without all that stuff aside, Flynn, how are you today?
I'm good. Happy to be here, man. Thanks, Brad.
I'm super excited to have you on. Again, I'm a fanboy. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's fantastic. So real quick, I want you to take some time and talk about who you are, kind of what you've been doing, and talk about the Echelon Front group that you're in, and kind of give us some background a little bit, and I'll ask some more questions and go from there. So give us who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, Navy brat. My dad was in the Navy for 24 years. Come from a big family. I'm the 6th of 8 kids. We're named alphabetically. I went to college up in upstate New York, commissioned officer in the Navy, did the ROTC program, was in the Navy for 8 years, 6 of those in the SEAL teams. Got out of the Navy back in 2012, went to business school for a couple of years, and then went and worked for a large consulting firm called McKinsey & Company out of their Seattle office. And about just over 2 years ago, I moved over to Echelon Front to take the chief strategy officer role and really help take the leadership principles that I was taught as a young SEAL officer by Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin, and what they've been teaching over the last decade, and work with companies longer term. So come in and do an assessment, identify where they're off, and then help to apply these principles longer term to organizations. So take a little bit of the McKinsey kind of broader consulting model, include the leadership, and then run those with companies. So we're doing a bunch of work on that end. Echelon Front, we're a leadership consulting firm, founded back in really 2011. Really kind of took it to the next level with the book Extreme Ownership that launched in 2015. And that was literally, Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin, as they got back from a deployment in 2006, they took over training roles in the SEAL teams. Jocko got back and they asked him what he wanted to do. He said, "I'll take over West Coast SEAL training." So not the training that, boats on heads, running with logs, sitting in freezing cold water, the BUDS initial SEAL training, but the actual advanced training where platoons are getting ready to deploy to combat. They took over that training. And then Leif Babin took over the junior officer training course. So all of the officers going through the SEAL pipeline, you'd spend 5 weeks with Leif. And back in early 2008, one of the first briefs I got in this junior officer training course was the Jocko brief. That's what it was called back then. And you guys know what the Jocko brief is. It's essentially extreme ownership. He taught me these lessons, the 4 laws of combat, these mindsets, this idea of ownership. That was the leadership doctrine that I was taught as a young SEAL officer. And now we've taken that doctrine and applied it to both personal life and business life. And then we go out and teach individuals and companies how to use this to change cultures and change lives.
Talk about the books just a little bit more. I assume nobody has ever heard of this that's listening. So we have 2 books that you want to mention.
Yeah, there's two books that have been written by Leif Babin and Jocko Willink. First one, Extreme Ownership. Again, that's the 101, the leadership 101. And what's made it so successful is that there's a bunch of leadership books out there. A bunch of leadership books. And the reason it's so successful is that they've taken these combat leadership principles and describe them in a very practical way of how you actually implement them both in business and personal life. And they're kind of structured they tell a short combat story on where they learn this principle. They talk about the actual principle itself, the application of it, and then they talk a little about business, how you apply this to business. And so, again, I think at its core, what's made it so successful is that these principles, they teach them in a way that people can understand. And most importantly, teach them in a way that people can go and do something different, change a conversation, change a behavior. And so it's not some, real deep theory on leadership. It's like, hey, this is what good leadership looks like. Go and do this and you'll be more effective. And then the second book, the Dichotomy of Leadership, was really, as Extreme Ownership launched, people who were already kind of aligned that way and, took ownership of everything and they obviously extreme aligned with these people. They would go out and they implement these principles and they would take ownership of everything that impacts their mission, every piece of the mission. And all of a sudden their teams weren't supporting them. The teams weren't making decisions. The teams weren't doing things that were helpful to the overall mission because they were owning everything. And so as they started to go out and talk to companies that have implemented this extreme ownership, they realized that there actually might have been a mistake. While extreme ownership is a good brand, right? It's a catchy kind of brand name. It's not actually what's required to be a good leader. The most important to being good leaders is this idea of balance. And yeah, you want to you still take ownership of everything. That's guaranteed. That's for sure. But the way that you do that, you actually have to balance things. And so, you have competing priorities. There's competing things, and a lot of times both times are right, and you have to decide which side you go to. So the dichotomy is all about really the application of these leadership principles and how you can go too far in one direction, it's ineffective, or you go too far in the other direction and it's ineffective as well. And so you have to find a way to get to balance. And so the extreme ownership is like an introduction to it. The dichotomy is a little more on the implementation, some of the challenges with the implementation.
Talk to us more about your SEAL experience, because I think that's very intriguing and a lot of people want to learn more about that.
Yeah, so I was in the Navy for a couple of years. I deployed. I was on a ship, the USS McCampbell out of San Diego, and I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do in the Navy. And then as I deployed, and obviously 9/11, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Enduring Freedom, the global war on terror had kicked off. I found myself sitting off the coast of Iraq, and realized. We're doing some oil platform defense. I was boarding some other vessels in the area, but there was I felt like there was more I could do. I could contribute in a more direct way. And so literally a week before we came back to San Diego, I said, all right, I'm gonna put my hat in and try to get picked up for the SEAL program, the BUDS program. I got back from that deployment. I put my application in and I got picked up for it, went to the program. And, SEAL training is hard. I mean, it's hard training. Some of the books out there written about SEAL training makes it seem like it's impossible. It's not. Hundreds of guys make it through every year, but it is hard training. You're cold, you're wet, you're sandy, you're tired, and you have to, you have to not get caught up in the moment, but also not look too far away, right? Because if you're looking at the 7 months of this, you're not going to make it. If you get caught too much in the actual moment of what you're doing, then that'll be a problem as well. And that's where most people quit, is that they can't they think too long term or too short term, and realize that the sweet spot kind of in the middle is where you want to be in this mindset to get through the training program. So I made it through the SEAL training program. I did the junior officer training course. and then went on to advanced training, and then eventually got to SEAL Team 1, where I was an assistant platoon commander there, and then a platoon commander. Had a really, really incredible experience as an assistant platoon commander, where I got to deploy to a country in the Middle East where we have a really small presence, and got to do some pretty interesting work with different parts of our government and at a very high level in that government to help them eradicate some of their terrorist problems. So I got a really cool experience there. And then I came back. I got promoted to platoon commander, and then did my platoon commander at SEAL Team 1, where we got to go to a bunch of different countries and support different training efforts, different operational efforts. And then we did a deployment. My last deployment was actually to the Philippines, where we had to send out. I had 5 different teams, literally on 5 different islands. So this idea of decentralized command, or how do you lead from a remote location, which is what a lot of leaders struggle with today, just based on where we're at. I imagine a bunch of leaders that are coming to the conference have teams that they don't see on a regular basis. And so I had to learn pretty quickly the right way to communicate, the right way to still lead my team without being present. So that was a really cool lesson for me. So that was kind of the summation of my SEAL experiences. I looked at either staying in the teams or getting out. I had just finished my platoon commander tour. Had a phenomenal experience. I got accepted to business school, and I kind of looked at what the career path looked like for an officer in the SEAL teams. That after your platoon commander, you might get a little more operational experience, but after that, you kind of become, it's more of the leadership strategic side. And so I decided to move out and go to business school and do some other stuff. There was also 2 young boys at the time, and in the SEAL teams, you're gone a lot. And it's not just deployments. You're training. If you're not deployed, you're training. And so there's a lot of time away from family. So it's kind of a combined decision to move off and do something.
The decision to exit is tough. I mean, I know that's kind of a thing too. Some people know, but some don't. In a prior life, I was an Army infantry officer, and like you, my greatest job ever. I would do it till this day as a platoon leader.
Yeah.
Make me an infantry platoon leader. I'll do that job until I die. It is a phenomenal deal to be able to lead troops either in light infantry or mechanized infantry. And I had the opportunity to do both. So I was very fortunate. And then again, once you get promoted, as soon as you make captain, you go to staff level, and just like the life is sucked out of you. You're no longer a door kicker. You're not with the guys. You're not a grunt. You're just a staff officer, middle management. And so that spurred me to get on. Now, when you decided to exit, you went to business school. So tell me more about that. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, I studied business and management systems in undergrad, and I always wanted to learn more about it. And so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I was so focused on my time in the military, my time in the SEAL teams, that I didn't really take too much time to look up and out and see what was even available. So business school for me made a lot of sense. It gave me a couple of years to kind of figure out what was out there, figure out where I wanted to plug in. I was fortunate to go to Harvard Business School. And it's a great organization that has a pretty interesting view of leadership, and arguably one of the best schools that teach leadership. And so as I thought about my experience in the military, I wanted some help actually putting some framework around it so I could apply it from a business perspective. And I figured Harvard was the best place to do that. So I ended up going there. A phenomenal experience there. Met some incredible people. Was always the dumbest guy in the room, which is cool because I got to learn from everyone, and had just a phenomenal experience getting to help learn how my experience in the military, my leadership experiences, the things that I did well and struggle with from a leadership perspective, how much that applies to the challenges that my classmates faced a little bit, but they're more importantly going to face as they actually move into real leadership positions. So my contribution to the class was just around the actual practical leadership, which is interesting now that I'm how many 7-8 years later now teaching this to companies in a way where I actually kind of started a little bit when in business school. And so, again, the business school helped me learn the terminology, understand a bit of what was out there, understand how businesses are generally structured and put together and how you talk about it and, the cash flow, all the kind of tactical stuff. But for me, most important during that time was the ability to take what I had learned in the military and then start to, translate it to the way that it works in business. So that was really the first step for me there, which was incredible.
Being a professional consultant, right? Echelon Front is a professional consulting firm for businesses, large businesses. Have you personally helped any big businesses that we might have heard of? And I know I'm putting you on the spot with this question, and maybe you're not even allowed to say, but is there any that you could potentially drop names, just like, hey, I helped, so-and-so grow something? Is there something cool like that you can tell?
Well, we actually do keep our client list confidential. But there's a number of clients out there that promote that they work with us. So I think the best example of one of the big wins we've had recently is this company called Groundworks. They're a foundation, a residential foundation repair company, and they started. It was Matt Malone, the CEO. He bought, it was one branch or two branches back in Virginia Beach. This was 3 years ago. And I think they're doing a couple, it was maybe $25 million in revenue. And then literally 2 weeks ago, they just sold to a private equity firm for a significant amount of money this year they did $250 million in revenue and are continuing to grow. And so just the massive amount of growth. And what they did, which was cool about Groundworks, is they took these extreme ownership leadership principles and that became their culture. That became the framework, the way they talked about leadership. And so as Matt was growing the company and adding these different branches and kind of snatching up these mom and pop residential, foundation repair companies across the East Coast and then slowly moving to the Midwest, he realized he needed to figure out the right way to embed these principles and bring people on board. And so he brought us in to do a lot of that, help of the cultural integration. So, one of the things that we do, every branch that he buys, we go in and do a field training exercise. We take the top 25 leaders of that branch or that organization, and we put them through a field training exercise, which essentially means we introduce them to the principles. We talk about some application of these principles to the business. And then really day two, we give them laser tag guns. We put them into a task unit, into a military structure, and we give them target packages, and they go out into these paintball fields or airsoft fields, and they run operations just like we did. So we teach them these leadership principles the way that I actually learned them, the exact way that I learned them. We teach them that way, and then we, it's kind of the day, which is a lot of fun, obviously, but it's broken up in we plan a mission for 20 minutes, go run an operation for 20 minutes, and then we spend 20 minutes debriefing the operation. And the debriefs aren't around, hey, you should have cleared left instead of cleared right, or you should have done that. It done the tactical stuff. They screw it all up because it doesn't matter. What matters is the broader principle. And hey, that when you saw this happen out there, you actually see that in your business as well. When you go to a job site and you're talking to a foreman and a crewman, that you need to make these changes. So we spend a lot of time about tying those to the business.
What are some of the really interesting revelations you get out of the civilians doing this militaristic training where they're just thrown into it? I mean, clearly there's got to be some for you, it's got to be some rewarding aha moments that come out of that from folks that have never done anything like this. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, now I get it. Now I understand. Give us some of that. Cause I can imagine just light bulbs that go off. It's just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, so we teach these 4 laws of combat, right? This idea of cover, move, which is a gunfighting tactic, right? So we teach that, and you have to, provide cover fire so your other team can move, right? That's cover, move. The second one is simple plans. The way you communicate the plans needs to be simple, clear, and concise, or people can't actually execute. Prioritize and execute. That's the 3rd law of combat. And that's, when we go out and one thing happens, one bad thing happens, and inevitably 12 or 13 bad things happen, and all these problems come up, and you got to solve them all. You can't solve them all at the same time. What you have to do is detach emotionally, identify what's going to have the most impact, and then go solve that one problem, then move on to the next. Not anything dissimilar to what you guys deal with, with property management, right? Every day is probably a little bit like that. And what you have to do is detach emotion, right? Identify the things that need to happen, and then choose the one that's going to have the most impact. And the last one is this idea of decentralized command, which is pushing decision-making down to the lowest level. It's leadership at every single level. And the way that you do that is explaining the why behind the actual mission, the commander's intent, so that when people run into problems, run into issues, they can actually solve their own problem and get the problem solved, as opposed to going back to the boss and asking a bunch of questions, right? So that's kind of those are the 4 laws. Those are the actions that we talk about. That's what's found in extreme ownership. And so we test these leaders on these. And we, cover, move, gunfighting tactic. They don't cover for each other, and so they struggle with that. But for me, the big aha moments typically are on the prioritize and execute. We talk a lot about as a leader, as a young SEAL officer. I was taught very early on, my job was not to shoot my gun. Now that broke my heart, right? Because that's what I wanted to do. Guys can become SEALs because they wanted to go shoot bad guys, right? And I realized that wasn't my job. My job is to get off my gun. My job is to take my gun, put it in a safe, point in a safe direction, get some cover, look around, identify all the things that need to happen, and provide the resources to my team so they can solve all the problems. Right, that was my job. And you'll see these leaders. We'll put them in situations where they're leading, in a very uncomfortable situation. They're not combat leaders in any way, but they're in charge of making decisions, solving problems, and they will end up getting sucked into all these minute problems. They'll get sucked into clearing a building. They'll get sucked into a firefight with one of the enemies, and they front sight focus and they lose track of the broader picture. And all of a sudden, when we're actually able to pull them out of that one problem they're working on, it's total mayhem and chaos, right? Because they got on their gun. And so this idea of, hey, and the reason they got on their gun is because they got emotional. They got into this fire. It's a very emotional thing. And so what you have to do is, when you feel yourself getting emotional, detach, get off your gun is really one of the key takeaways that we see. And the light bulb comes off for leaders who historically like to solve problems, like to get things done, right? And they get sucked in so much they actually forget their main job is to actually put their people in positions to be successful, to think 2 or 3 steps ahead, to build those relationships with other groups that you might need to leverage months from now. That's what you should be doing as a leader. And so yeah, go ahead.
If I may offer, that could be maybe a little bit of a different term, is you hear the cliche, you're working in the business and you're not working on the business.
Yeah.
That's a good way to think of it. You're on your front sight and you're working in the business. Like you are trying to approve an application. You are trying to move in a tenant. You are working on a work order versus maybe you should be implementing something bigger at the higher level to where somebody can come in and do some of that for you. And you're working on the business, for example. So I guess I'm trying to relate that into the cliches that we always hear, and your business, on your business, that type of stuff. So that makes a ton of sense. Now, I want you to talk about, we have you coming to the Mastermind Conference. You're going to be speaking Wednesday. You have a 75-minute presentation. Just kind of give us a tidbit of what you think you want to cover through that.
Yeah, so that 75 minutes goes pretty quick. So what I'll do is I'll give a kind of a short intro on myself, kind of my path, my journey to the SEAL teams. Talk about my perspective on my service and how it changed based on a few things. Then I'll go into a little bit of story of the battle of Ramadi. So a pretty hairy battle that was a tough situation where people were saying we couldn't win there. Task Unit Bruisers, who was a SEAL task unit from SEAL Team 3, led by Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin, they deployed to Ramadi, and they played a key role in supporting the broader infantry. The 11AD, the Armored Division, the 11AD supported them in actually winning that battle. And as Jocko came back from that deployment, the best thing that he could take were these lessons that he learned there, because it was significant. The battle they faced and the cost that they paid was heavy, and they came back and took these lessons. He took over West Coast SEAL training, like I said, and then realized that these young SEAL officers didn't understand the fundamental principles that made you successful in combat. And literally after observing the first operation, turnover operation with his predecessor, went back and wrote out these 4 laws of combat and started to teach the young SEAL officers what these were. And so then, I'll talk a little bit about that. And then most importantly, we'll get into the principles themselves, the, cover move, which is teamwork, simple plan, simple communication, prioritize and execute. You need to detach emotions, right? Identify what needs to happen, choose the right thing, decentralized command, push the decision-making down, empowering your subordinate leaders to make decisions, solve problems, right? Those are the 4 behaviors. And then there's some mindsets, right? So those are what we see the best leaders, the best SEAL, the best teams do, the best SEAL platoons, they do those 4 things. But what allows you to do those are some mindsets that you don't see. Those are kind of, underwater. And this idea of being default aggressive, right? Being not aggressive towards people, right? But aggressive towards problems, towards solutions to problems, towards opportunities in your market space. You can't just dip a toe in the water. If the good deal is out there, you actually need to figure out how to go and then be aggressive in going after it. Same what we learn in combat, right? The more aggressive you get in combat wins. Innovate and adapt. Again, that's near dear to your guys' heart. There's a lot of innovation and that happens in every industry, even property management, as I can imagine. There's a bunch of things changing. And if you're not keeping up with that, if you're not innovating what you do, your processes, how you serve your customers, serve your clients, serve your owners, you're gonna go away because someone else is doing it right now. And then the most important characteristic of a leader, this mindset of humility, of being able to check your ego, talk a little bit about what that looks like. And then the other mindset that is kind of near and dear to Jocko's heart, this idea of discipline equals freedom, right? So it's structured, rigid way of doing things, actually gives you the freedom to be very adaptable, very agile. All the business terms out there, it allows you to be very flexible in your operating environment because you have processes that you follow. And you don't have to spend a bunch of time figuring out how you're going to get a problem solved. You can go solve that problem because you follow, disciplined operating procedures. And then the last piece, and then we'll spend the most time on, this idea of extreme ownership, right? Which is you own everything that impacts your piece of the mission, up the chain of command, down the chain of command, across the chain of command. If it impacts your piece of the mission, you have to take ownership of it, right? Every success, every failure, right? Every problem, every solution, and you have to commit that if it impacts your piece of the mission, it's actually on you to get that problem solved. Right. And that's what the kind of presentation will be. It'll be interactive. I'll get some volunteers to come up and help me show what the military version of some of these laws of combat are. But it'll be, we'll introduce that and then spend some time talking about how the attendees can apply it to both their business, right, but also life, which is great. Their relationships with their husbands, their wives, their children. It applies there as well.
The red meat. I love the red meat because this is something that we've always wanted. This is stuff we can actually use. A lot of conferences we see in the space are, people get up there and say, do push-ups and drink water. And it's just, that's their whole stick of like, drink more water and you'll have a healthy life and you'll have a healthy business. But you guys are actually breaking it down into actionable steps. And I absolutely love it. That's why I ran to you guys when we started putting this conference on and worked out, definitely worked out some terms to get you all in. I want you to talk through
just on that, Brad, we kind of compete in the space of motivational speakers and people get motivated by our message. There's no question about that. But if people walk away only feeling motivated, then I've completely failed my job as a speaker, as a leadership instructor. We're leadership instructors. We're not speakers, right? We're actually instructors. So what we do is try to break these principles down in a way that people can go and do things differently. That's the intent. It's not to feel motivation because motivation is fleeting. Motivation goes away. What you need are actionable things that you can go and do. And so that's my goal. That's 100% my goal. And that's what we'll spend a lot of the time on how you apply the stuff.
No surprise there. That's why I ran to you guys. I want to hear more about the 3-hour seminar we're talking about because you're doing the 75-minute presentation, but then you have a a block of working time that we're going to work with the add-on seminar where folks can attend. That's going to be a smaller group, 50, 60 folks. And so you're going to have a 3-hour block with them. Kind of talk us through some of that and how you envision that working out.
Yeah, so I don't want to give away too much of the surprise, but there's, what we'll do is we'll take these principles and then, I'm going to break you guys up into different teams and actually test you on your ability to apply these principles. And what's cool, I'll put you in a kind of an uncomfortable situation where there's time pressure, where there's challenges you face in doing what your task, right? Where you have to deal with other people, right? So like a legitimate leadership challenge that you guys deal with every single day, kind of put you into one of these scenarios and see how you respond. And then, most importantly, what we'll do is spend some time talking about afterwards. Hey, what are the lessons we've learned there? What do we see? What are the takeaways? And then we'll spend some time actually on an individual application of this, as we talked about balance being the most important. Really the key to good leadership is being balanced in these different priorities or this kind of competing priorities. We've created a self-assessment tool to where you can assess yourself where you're at as a leader and identify where you're off balance, right? And then what we'll do is again, it's first step to identify where you're off balance, but most importantly, what are you going to do differently to get back to balance in that area, right? So we'll spend some time talking about what that looks like. We'll actually practice some conversation on how to take ownership in a conversation where, listen, man, a mistake was made, a problem happened. So, you didn't hit a number, and obviously 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 people contributed to that mistake, that problem. How do you step up and take ownership of the entire thing, right? And that's the conversation that I'm going to train you guys on how to have that conversation. So whether it's going home, with your wife and there's a problem comes up, hey, here's how I should have that conversation so that, I'm actually taking ownership and the problem gets solved. And what we see time and time again is when you step up as a leader and take ownership, people actually follow you. And they'll say, you know what, boss, that's actually not your fault. I could have done this differently. I could have done this differently. And now when you're taking ownership of the problem, you're doing things differently and they're doing things differently, the problem goes away. The issue that we see with most companies is that a problem comes up and the first thing to do, hey, who's at fault here? They catch some blame and pointing fingers. And when you're just doing that, the problem stays in the middle of the room and it doesn't get solved. But if you step up as a leader, take ownership of a problem, people follow you and that problem goes away.
Now, this seminar is focused basically at all levels, right? You don't have to be the business owner. You could be a staffer but it's going to be that type of a seminar where everybody can get something out of it.
Yeah, it's when we talk about leadership at Echelon Front and leadership in the SEAL teams, I want to make it crystal clear: leadership has nothing to do with an organizational chart. Leadership has nothing to do with people reporting to other people. My frontline enlisted SEAL, who machine gunner, only job was to carry a big machine gun, a lot of ammunition, and hold down this field of fire, section of fire. He was expected to be a leader. A problem came, like he was supposed to find a solution to that problem. Lead up the chain of command to get resources to solve his own problems. That's leadership. It's nothing to do with organizational charts. So these principles apply at every level, whether you're a Fortune 100 CEO that we're working with, or you're a frontline trooper in an oil and gas company that's on an oil rig. These apply across the board.
That's what most excites me, is it's at every level. And we have to think like that as business owners and anybody in the property management industry, is you kind of have to look up and down the organizational chart so you can kind of understand a little bit on both sides. And that's one of the things that you guys talk about in the books is I'm forgetting the phrase, but it's like up, down, bottom, down. I mean, talk me through some of that.
So tell me a little bit more about what you, tell me a little more about the
Jocko always talked about, you talked about, if you're at the bottom rung and you're looking up, you need to understand the leadership going up and the leadership coming down. And so that's something you guys can talk about through the 3-hour seminar as well.
Sure. Yeah. So this idea of decentralized command, which is, the fourth law of combat, is you need to understand how your piece of the mission fits into the broader mission. Because the best teams, the best leaders, the best individual contributors, whatever it is, you need to understand the roles and responsibilities and the job of those above you, directly above you, and actually directly below you. And the reason that's important is because, number one, you need to have context of how your actions impact other pieces. But then two, this idea of cover move, of supporting other groups, supporting other people. If they get stuck doing something else, you can actually step up and support them as well. So you can go up the chain and do your boss's job for a little bit. Now, the key here is don't stay there too long, right? And the bigger issue is when you go down to help your team and you're doing their job. Yeah, you might want to solve that specific problem, but what you need to do is quickly get back to your position, because if you're doing their job, no one's doing your job, and that's going to be a problem longer term, right? So that's very much short term. And so there's this idea of decentralized command, of understanding how you fit into the broader mission, the commander's intent, and then also this idea of cover move, of being able to support each other up and down the chain of command, is really what we'll talk about as well.
What do you envision as the end state of attending that 3-hour seminar? What is their mindset going to be? What are they going to learn? Just one little tidbit of what you think they're going to get out of that 3-hour seminar, just for giggles. Give me one cool thing that'll come out. Well,
so I think the first takeaway is that the leadership principles we teach are not something that's new. They're literally not. It's good leadership, teamwork. Cover move is teamwork. Is teamwork some new concept? No, of course not. But what we'll do is talk about the importance of teamwork and how you actually start to build relationships, which is the foundation of teamwork. How you build those relationships, right? And so, whether they come to the first session or the second session, again, everyone will have a better understanding of these different actions, these different behaviors, these laws of combat that we talk about. And I guarantee everyone will have one or two things they can actually go and do, a conversation they can have, an opportunity for them to actually step up and take ownership, an experiment they can take with taking ownership. And I'll kind of talk about, hey, listen, just experiment with this. Next time something comes up, problem comes up, just experiment. Just see what happens when you take ownership. See what happens how other people respond. And if people do that, they'll see the power of this. And so, again, we'll get they'll be motivated. They'll probably be motivated. They'll be fired up. But most importantly, what they'll do is they'll have one or two things they can actually go and do immediately. It's a text they can send. It's a phone call. And we get kind of constant feedback of sometimes midstream in a workshop. We're working with someone, they go call their wife and take ownership for something. And they'll come back and say, hey, man, it actually worked. There's this issue with whatever it was. I actually called her and told her this. And she's like, no, it actually worked. And now that problem is solved. Now the other problem's going to come up. But the people have something to take away and go and do. As long as they're listening and introspective and humble, right? They're able to check their ego a little bit, realize that there's more for them to learn, more, areas for them to improve. If they come with that mindset, they'll have a bunch of things they can go fix.
Fantastic stuff. Flynn, I really appreciate you coming on today. this is more than enough than what we needed to kind of give us an overview of what your presence is going to be at the Mastermind Conference. You'll be there Wednesday, March 4th, doing a couple presentations, a 75-minute main stage presentation for the entire conference, and then a 3-hour seminar breakout after that. That's going to be an additional fee if anybody wants to attend, but it would have been part of their main package if they bought the main package for the conference. So again, thank you very much for coming on. Want to take advantage of your time and don't bleed you here too much, but look forward to seeing you in about 30 plus days, my friend. Well, see
awesome,
you then.
man. Yeah, fired up. Thanks, Brad.
All right. Thank you much.
Take care.
Are you tired of chasing tenants to comply with having renter's insurance? Insurance Management Group can solve this problem with a master tenants insurance policy. Keep tenants in compliance with your lease agreement and help protect all parties involved. A master tenants insurance policy can also add an additional revenue stream to your business. Contact Derek Scott at 918-728-8992 or visit imgadvisors.com. To learn more, listen to the Property Management Mastermind Show podcast, episode number 36.
This has been a podcast episode by PropertyManagementProductions.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave us feedback, and come back for our next episode.